Every day we look for stories from Africa, and every day we see the same stuff. Corruption trials, attempted coups, terror attacks, and so on. It makes you wonder, does nothing good happen in Africa? Or is it always just bad news? Well, turns out it's not an Africa problem, it's a media problem. Just like anywhere in the world, Africa has good and bad news, but global media tends to focus on the bad. It's always poverty or security crises. And this stereotype has a financial cost, $4.2 billion. That's how much negative coverage is costing Africa. Let me explain how. This report was prepared by two agencies, a consultant group named Africa Practice and an advocacy group named Africa No Filter. Their methodology is quite interesting. First, they picked 4 African nations: Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt. Then they picked countries with similar social and economic conditions outside Africa. Malaysia is similar to Kenya and Nigeria. Denmark is similar to South Africa, according to them, and Thailand to Egypt. And finally, they compared election coverage in these countries. Guess what they found? In African polls, the coverage was mostly negative, things like violence and rigging. And elsewhere, just your normal stuff, things like top candidates and issues. Consider Kenya and Malaysia. 88% of articles about Kenya's election were negative. In Malaysia, it was just 48%. Do you see the bias? This bias can affect your finances, especially your loans. Most lenders are charging risk premiums in Africa, basically more interest than normal. They say Africa is a risky bet, our money may or may not be safe there, so we will charge you more. If you correct this narrative, if you cancel this risk premium, Africa's interest rates could reduce by 1%, which translates to $4.2 billion. Do you see how powerful narratives are then? They can make or break economies. Just think back to the early 2010s. Every global outlet was talking about the same thing: Grexit, the looming exit of Greece from the European Union. Spoiler alert, it did not happen. But the paranoia did not help. It shook investor confidence further. The Western media does a lot of this, by the way. They define countries in set terms. Mexico is always drug cartels and gang violence. Japan is advanced but meek. Russia is still dreaming about the Soviet Union. South Asia is poor brown people, and West Asia is rich brown people plus terrorism. It's not just the news media. Movies also spread such narratives. You may remember Slumdog Millionaire. It romanticized slums and poverty in India. The fact is, only 5% of Indians live in slums. I could say the same about some of these global indices like ease of doing business or passport power rankings or travel safety rankings. They have a direct impact on a country's economy. Yet the methodology is not always perfect, which is why narratives have become strategic. Some countries have clearly weaponized them. For example, there's something called the CNN effect. It's named after the US news channel, but it applies to media in general. How media coverage can influence domestic and foreign policy. Al Jazeera is doing it right now. They're funded by the Qatar government. And they're building consensus against Israel and Gaza. How? By constantly publishing stories against Israel and by ignoring what the other side did. So every country basically has two options: either shape your own narrative or let others shape it for you. China is doing the first. They have spent billions expanding their media footprint. They also share content with foreign agencies, of course, only the favorable type. Africa is stuck with the second option. Their media landscape is not as developed, so others are shaping their narrative for them. It's a challenge for India too. Some of these Western outlets have decades of head start. So now's the time to catch up, because our world runs on power and narratives can be deadlier than missiles.
Firstpost decodes the U.S. election. Explains how America chooses its president. Your primer on the race to the White House. Everything you need to know about how America votes and its global implications. U.S. Election Explained. Every Monday and Thursday only on Firstpost.